I feel like all of the book analysis videos I watch on YouTube are filmed from a bookshelf. So we're gonna make do with what I've got in my dorm room right now. Also, apologies for the echo. I know that it exists, but I don't own a microphone and I'm filming this on my phone, so don't worry about it. So today I will be doing a video analysis for my final because I don't want to write a paper. I will be analyzing this book. So if I were to give a thesis statement, I would say that I will be using the irony of narration in the young adult novel by Mike Cadden to analyze the book Bad Unicorn by Plate F. Clark and discuss the use of double voice narration throughout the novel. So first, I'm going to give an intro to the novel because I'm going to assume that you have not read this. I love this book. I have never met another person who has read it, and I checked Goodreads, and I think there's like 1,000 people who have logged it on Goodreads, so it's truly one of the nicher books I've read. So essentially, this book came out in 2013, and I got this copy in 2015, so you can see it's like very battered. And I first read it in 5th grade, so I would have been like 10. And I know we've discussed in class the age range with young adult literature, and I would say this falls on the lower spectrum. I know for my last 2 papers, I talked about Divergent and the Murderbot Diaries, which I would say are definitely on the upper range. This I would categorize as being very like middle grade. I think when I was 10, this was like the perfect age to read this book. So a little like quick summary of this book. It is truly batshit insane, and so I'm going to not talk about the majority of the plot because it's probably not going to be necessary for this analysis. So essentially, Bad Unicorn is a story about Max Spencer, who's a 7th grader, and he has this book. It's called the Codex of Infinite Knowability, and only he can read it, and it like shocks anybody who touches it other than Max. And it's this strange book that he just has always had. He finds it like under his bed, and he brings it to school because he has to do like a book report on it. And all of these shenanigans happen, and basically his best friend Dirk, and this girl Sarah are all sent home early for the day. They go to like a game shop where Max accidentally casts a spell that sends them like hundreds of years into the future. And so all of this is going on. Simultaneously, there are 2 other side plots, and they're all equally important. I'll quickly cover the one because it's not going to be super important for my analysis. There's the magical world, which is called the Magris, and there's the human world, which is called the Tekris, and we're not going to worry about the other worlds. So in the Magris, present day is who I consider the main antagonist of the overall series, Reservoir Dreadbringer, very evil name. And he is a sorcerer, and he's trying to find the Codex of Infinite Knowability and the Blood Heir who can read it, basically. And so he's making like all these deals, and he's like got all his little schemes going. So he's like kind of puppeting everything that happens in this book from the shadows. And then he comes into play later in the series because this book is the first in a trilogy. And then he is the one who incites the main antagonist of the first novel to go off and attack Max. So the main antagonist is the titular Bad Unicorn. Her name is Princess the Destroyer. In this universe, unicorns are generally not the nicest, but she especially is horrible, and she usually like raises the ground wherever she goes, and she eats a lot of people. And so this is the main like inciting incident of the story is Reservoir goes to Princess, and he's like, hey, can I send you to the human world to find the Blood Heir? and bring him back, because only unicorns have the power to survive in the human world where there isn't like inherent latent magic everywhere. And if you go, Reservoir says he'll send her to Texas, where she's allowed to eat all the humans that she wants, because she has a intense like desire to she's very gluttonous. That's like her main driving force. And she also has an assistant named Magar, and he's like her little pet wizard, basically. So then she's also in the future. So we've got a present day human world, but then, like I said, Max sends him and his friends to the future. So then they're in the future version of the human world where robots have taken over. There's been a machine uprising. Princess literally ate every human. She fully wiped out all humans. The entire species is gone. And because she helped the robots in the robot uprising, they uploaded her consciousness and Magar, the assistant's consciousness, into robot bodies. And so now they are cyborgs. I was so tempted to do cyborg feminism again, but I did not. So we won't be dwelling on that too much in this analysis. But essentially, that's the main thing that's happening, except there are so many other things that happen. There's like gladiatorial combat and like hunting people for sport, and there's so many crazy things that happen in this book and that will continue to happen in the next 2 books. But that's kind of just the background information for the universe that we are operating within. So, double-voiced narration. According to Mike Cadden, essentially, he describes multiple different types of narration within young adult literature, because the whole thing is, obviously, an adult is writing these books. Clearly, these books aren't actually being written by middle schoolers, despite the fact that he's imitating a middle schooler's voice for this entire book. So, Cadden, he describes different types of narration. So there's like first person narration in which the like protagonist of the book is clearly supposed to be the narrator. And so obviously we know an author writes a book, so obviously the author is like technically narrating, but you're supposed to assume that it is the protagonist speaking to you. And then there's also third person limited, in which like we are following a like main character, and obviously again the narration is being written by the author, but you're supposed to assume that it's about the character, not necessarily that the character is talking to you, but clearly it's still about them. And then there's third person omniscient, in which there is like typically just kind of a nebulous narrator, and it will be talking to you, and it's not associated with any one character, but you might still hear characters' thoughts at times. So Bad Unicorn is written in third person omniscient, and clearly you follow characters. Like I said, there are like the 3 separate plots going on: the plot with Max, the plot with Princess, and the plot with Reservoir. So when you're following each of those 3 main plots, it's obvious that like the character influences the narration a little bit. You kind of get like a glimpse into their head, you know, like the voice changes slightly to fit the character. For example, Reservoir, his like the prose in his sections feels a little more like generic fantasy. All the dialogue is a little more like fantasy, you know, they don't use contractions, they use kind of archaic language sometimes. And then when you're following Max, he makes a lot of like middle school boy jokes, you know, and he's like very flustered and kind of pathetic as a person, and that really influences how the narrator talks. But there is still a very consistent narration voice throughout the novel. It just is influenced a bit by each character. So there is a quote that I want to read from Mike Cadden, and he says, when an adult writer speaks through a young adult's consciousness to a young adult audience, he or she is involved in a top-down or vertical power relationship. It becomes important then that there be equal or horizontal power relations between the major characters within the text so that the young adult reader has the power to see the opposing ideologies at play. So essentially what that quote means is there's like this power dynamic where, yes, a young adult voice is coming out of the character's mouth, but it's written by an adult. And so there's this strange dynamic of like an adult controlling a young adult. And so it's important to have multiple young adult characters that can interact with each other so that instead of this like vague adult narrator that's talking about Max, there's like the narrator is talking about both Max and Sarah, and we can see how Max and Sarah interact, and they're more on like a similar level to each other since they're the same age. And that that changes the dynamic between characters versus just having a character described through the eyes of an adult narrator. There is an example that I found in the book. So on page 173 of the book, I'm not gonna read a quote from it because it's a bit of a lengthy section, but essentially what's happening is Max is a very like unconfident. He definitely doesn't believe in himself at all. I remember the book starts by talking about how he's like not allowed to participate in group sports in gym, and they make him do imaginary jump rope on the sidelines while everybody else plays it because the like student counselor thought it'd be better for his low self-esteem. And if that doesn't perfectly sum up like Max Spencer as a character, so clearly we're seeing that he is very like awkward. He has no confidence. He's a loser. So we can see that he's just like, he doesn't believe in himself at all. But now they're stuck in the future and they have no way of getting home unless Max can figure out how to send them back home. And so he's having this conversation with Sarah, and she's like, hey buddy, I believe in you. Like, I know that this is crazy, but if anybody's gonna get us home, it's you, Max. And that especially is an important conversation since it's coming from Sarah, who is a very like intelligent, logical person. She's kind of like carrying their team usually because she gets like all A's. She's constantly quoting Sun Tzu. She like has been doing judo her whole life, so she's very like physically capable. And so she's like, to hear her have confidence in Max is very important. It has more weight to it. So this moment is really important because up until this point, we are seeing Max through the adult eyes of the narrator. But now through this dialogue, we get to see Max through the young adult eyes of Sarah. And we can see how he comes across to other people his age versus like how the narrator or how Max sees himself. The other thing that I wanted to talk about from the article is this quote about like double voice. It says, in active double-voiced discourse, no single position in the text is clearly endorsed or becomes clear at the expense of others, which enables the reader to consider the rightness of the positions based on the specific details of the narrative. There are opposing positions and worldviews, and hence irony, but the most active double-voiced discourse does more than simply entertain more than one voice. It achieves ideological parity. So essentially that quote is defining what active double voice is, and basically what that quote is saying is active double voice is when there are multiple characters throughout the novel and you are hearing their thoughts, you are like kind of in their head, and you're getting to see this world from multiple different perspectives. And specifically in active double voice, it is not passing judgment on any particular ideology. So there isn't a point in the narration where it's like, and this character is the good character, and this character has bad opinions. Like, usually it will just say, this is what this character thinks, this is how this character acts, and it leaves it up to the reader to interpret what they think is good and what they think is bad. So I think this is actually really well done in Bad Unicorn. And when you're in Max's perspective, you are following him, but you're also hearing Sarah's thoughts. You're hearing his best friend Dirk's thoughts, you know? You're seeing things from multiple different perspectives, even within one of the three distinct, like, pathways that we're going down. And then there are, like, honestly, I would say at least a third of this book is dedicated to Princess and Magar's journey, because at first it follows them as they're talking to Reservoir, agreeing to find Max, going on this very long, arduous journey to get to the human world. And then we're also seeing a few chapters in the future with Robo Princess and Robo Magar's perspectives. That is their names in the book, after they've become cyborgs. And this is very interesting because it does give you opportunity to really understand where these antagonists are coming from. There are times where Magar is like, yeah, Princess has always been evil. But those are, like, I think I can remember 2 times in this 425 page book where Magar says that. And so for the most part, like, the narrator doesn't weigh in on the morality of each character and if each character is right or wrong. That's what I really liked, the inclusion of the chapters, the chapters that follow Princess and Magar, because you get to see into Princess's head. You get to see into Magar's head. You know, you are given snippets of their backstories, their main motivations, and especially you get to see them in present day and then hundreds of years in the future. And it is so interesting because there is a moment where Princess sees the future version of herself and it disgusts her. So you get to see these characters not only on their own, separate from their role as, like, a, you know, antagonist to the protagonist, but you see them as their own people, not just as, like, filling that one role. And then you get to see them as people in different points of their lives. And I think that's really good because it allows what I would assume to be a younger audience to see these characters that are more three-dimensional and get to form their own opinions on if they think these characters are good or not. Like I said, obviously, like, Princess is evil. Come on, like, you hear her in her head. She's like, hell yeah, I'm just gonna murder this guy. Like, she always resorts to violence. She is always hungry. She always wants to eat some innocent civilian. So it's not like you're really struggling to figure out who's in the right and who's in the wrong here. But because it doesn't explicitly state it, it's a good exercise for a younger audience to be able to think these things through and come to their own conclusions. And there's a scene I really like towards the end of the book, and it's just a conversation between Robo Princess and Robo Magar in the future. And they're having a conversation where they are reminiscing on the past, and now that they've, like, run into Max Spencer, who, for the Robo, like, future versions of them, they had been chasing him for hundreds of years. For Max, this has been happening for, like, a week, but for them, it has quite literally been centuries of chasing after this elusive boy wizard who, like, ruined and also saved their lives almost, because, like, simultaneously they've been, like, haunted by this mission. You know, they've never been able to finish it, but also they gained immortality. Robo Princess is, like, a famous celebrity. I mean, Magar is constantly asking for death. He's quite literally like, the day that you finally kill me will put me out of my misery. So he's not happy about it. But Robo Princess is kind of living her best life in the future, and yet is still looking back on her time when she was alive. And you see Magar looking back, and it's especially tragic because He is a wizard. Obviously, he has dedicated his whole life to learning magic. And when he goes to the human realm, he loses all access to that magic because only a unicorn can still summon magic. So for centuries, he has not had access to the thing that he loves the most. And there's a moment for like 1 second where Princess feels genuine sympathy for him. And I think that's such a great moment where we get to see just the two of them, and we get to see them, like, see the side of them that wouldn't show up if this was exclusively narrated by Max and we only heard his thoughts on the matter. He would not know this backstory. He would not know that they are able to contain multitudes. There's a second scene I like. It's earlier in the book. This is a bit of a long quote, so I'm going to read it quickly. But this scene starts on page 203. Princess is, as I said, a celebrity. She created this like reality show almost, where every week these like robo hunters are set loose into the woods and they kill these innocent species called frobbits that Princess had specifically taken from the magical world and pulled into the human world so that she could slaughter them on live TV. And this has been happening for literal centuries. And now that Max, Sarah, and Dirk have shown up, they aren't sure what to do because the frobbits have basically like aided and abetted the humans. And because of that, there is now a target on the frobbits' back. And Princess has announced that she wants to find and kill Max on live TV and essentially wants to put them into gladiatorial combat. And so this quote is about that. While I'm sympathetic to everything that's happening to the frobbits, Sarah said, I think rediscovering the spell that can take us home is what's most important right now. This robo-princess killed every human on the planet, Dirk shot back. What do you think she's going to do if she finds us? Max looked over at the eager faces of the frobbits in the room. She'd probably wipe out anything that helped us, he said. We don't know that, Sarah added, but we do know that you finally made progress with the Codex. Progress toward getting us home, not entering a fight. Dwight says it's the most powerful magic book ever written, Dirk said, looking at his friend. The answer is in there, dude. You just have to have a noble cause to make it work. And that's what this is. Humanity comes back from the grave and strikes a blow for frobbits everywhere. It's why we're here. I know it. You can't know it, Sarah argued. I get that you want to believe it, but the truth is we don't know much at all right now, and that's why figuring out the Codex has to come first. Look, I think what's happening to the frobbits is terrible, but if we get ourselves killed, how's that going to help anyone? That's cold, Dirk replied. We don't have a choice, Max. When somebody needs you like this, you have to act. And a knee-jerk reaction is supposed to be the right answer. You don't just send soldiers into battle because they want to fight. You send them to boot camp where they learn to fight. We need time to learn, Max. That's all I'm saying. Then we can help. This quote demonstrates this idea of having like multiple voices interacting in the story. You know, the fact that we have seen narration from Dirk's perspective and Sarah's perspective, and especially Max's perspective. So we know them as people and we know how they think. And now they're interacting with each other. And this is a situation where no one's really in the wrong. Like Dirk makes a very good point that he thinks they should save the frobbits because the frobbits have been hunted for centuries and they went out of their way to save Max, Dirk, and Sarah. And so he feels like they should help protect them because there's a very good chance that they're going to be killed even harder now because Princess has a vendetta. And Sarah also makes a very good point that if like Robo Princess managed to eradicate the entire human race, what good will they do? You know, how will Sarah, Max, and Dirk manage to survive this fight? Max had also gotten his first close, this was the first time he had gotten close to discovering a spell that could take them home. So she thinks that he should focus on taking them home because then, they'll be hundreds of years in the past. They could potentially even stop this whole apocalypse from happening in the first place. And more importantly, they'll live to see another day. We understand where they're coming from because we know that Sarah is a very logical person who was really into history and constantly quoting Sun Tzu for some reason. And we know that Dirk plays a lot of video games and he really wants to live his video game dream. So we can understand where both are coming from. Both are making good points. And most importantly, the narrative doesn't say, Yeah, stupid Sarah over here wants to let all these Frobbits die. Dirk is in the right. And they don't say, yeah, stupid Dirk over here wants to save these like weird little creatures that all they do is die. They're like incredibly fragile. Whereas Sarah has a good idea to get home since they're already so close to finding a solution to get home. You know, there is no moment where the narration says that one is a better idea than the other. And that's because it is active double voice. All right, so to summarize things in a closing statement, I have one last quote from the article. It says, double voiced discourse achieved through providing multiple and equal YA consciousnesses and a clearly unreliable singular YA consciousness provides the YA audience the tools to grow as readers. So essentially saying that when a book has double voiced narration in it, it is giving readers the chance to read a book that has a lot of different opinions that might clash with each other, and it is allowing these young readers to see that and come to their own conclusions, which is like a good exercise in like strengthening your reading comprehension. I think this book has a strong example of double voicedness in it, and it makes it a stronger book. And I think that reading it at a young age, like 10, really introduces you to these ideas and allows you from a young age to start thinking more critically about the books you read. Yeah, that's all I got for now. I think that's it. Yeah, so this has been my analysis of Bad Unicorn by Plate F. Clark, using the article The Irony of Narration in the Young Adult Novel by Mike Cadden to talk about the double voicedness in this novel. If you like this video, make sure to give me an A on Canvas. Yeah, see ya.